Hello and good morning, my friends. How are you today? How are you doing? Take a step back and see how you're feeling. How are you feeling? Well, I can tell you that I'm feeling good today, and I am just inspired because yesterday I felt so good. I felt prepared and I felt good. And even if I taught something, I'm here in Sweden, of course, and I'm teaching the Royal Swedish Ballet, a Forsyth piece, and I taught some wrong material or I taught the right material to the wrong person. But you know, it's so interesting. It's like I recognize that in myself, and my old self could have beat myself up and said, "Oh my God, you made a mistake. You made a mistake." There are no mistakes. There just are no mistakes because we learn from everything. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today, because I was just thinking about what I'm going to talk about. And I was just listening to Alan Watts, as I do in the morning. Sometimes I read when I get up and take some time just to read. I like to read and, I don't know, kind of center myself. And sometimes I meditate, sometimes I don't. So there are no really routines in my life. Some habits and routines for sure. But anyway, the topic is about here, you know, it's interesting because if you're a dancer or not a dancer, or in the profession of like ballet, especially ballet, like classical ballet, which is my first love in the beginning of my dancing career, as I was trained as a classical ballet dancer. And you know, I came into this world, and I'm going to talk about like polar opposites. Like, what are polar opposites? In the sense of, like, because I'm talking about classical ballet, with classical ballet comes a kind of hierarchy. And a hierarchy is like, there's so many levels. It depends on which country, which company you're in. But there are levels of positions, as I guess in any company, which is interesting because there's this hierarchy. So there's like these principals, which are these stars, or étoiles, they say in French, star. And then there are like categories underneath that, like first soloist, second soloist, corps de ballet, coryphée, or these things, I don't know. And they go down to different levels. And like, you know what, it makes me really think about separation because clearly we do not live in a society of equals. We don't, and it's interesting just to recognize that. And you know, so if we're not, and we're also not raised, you know, there's these polar opposites of superiority and inferiority, which is, you know, in the workplace kind of separated. We can separate ourselves, and sometimes some individuals can really believe that because they have a certain position, they have power over people and power to influence, which is true in a way. And then there, you know, the people who feel inferior, which is something actually I think interesting to pay attention to, because under certain conditions, like I say, this inferiority complex comes into play. And when we get positions of power, or we reach a certain position in our business or whatever, we think that this superficial feeling of superiority, which I think is superficial because no one is separate from each other, at least, like, I don't know, it is on a certain level of reality. But you know, when you start to get some kind of permission because of a title, or because you're a politician, or you have a lot of money, and you know, these polar opposites exist even in our language, you know, like dualistic properties, I guess you could say, like right and wrong, and up and down, and inferior, superior, better, worse, not good, good. All of these things within our language, you know, is like, it's kind of cheap in a way. Because when I start to look at it and I live from a conscious, you know what is so great about human beings is that we, separate from animals, is that we have consciousness, and we can become aware of our conscious, and start to make decisions from that point of view, and that doesn't separate us, because we realize that we all have that possibility within us, you know? And, you know, I'm guilty of this myself, because I have, when I was younger, because I was raised in a very competitive society, as well as everybody else, I started to adapt certain behaviors because I reached certain things. So I always got attention when I was younger by being good. And so, you know, I didn't allow anyone to see my bad. So, you know, those things work together, because you can't have bad without having good, and you can't have good without having bad, whatever these labels are. But, you know, like, we all really are what I think, without all of that stuff, you know, all that's labeled in societal, like, this is our conditioning, our brainwashing, our kind of thing. It's interesting to just recognize that play, and it's a big play game that we play. And most of us play that because we're just, I think, as I look out, this is only my perspective, but as I read and I see and I look around, I look at the media and I look at, you know, like, just simple things of, like, you know, the feeling of separation because you have more money, or, you know, if you're a higher class and lower class. So these opposites teach us about each other, because one can't exist without the other. So it's like, you know, I'm in Sweden right now, and I have no judgments on, you know, they have a monarchy here, and, you know, it's so old, and it is part of their society, also in Britain as well. And these monarchies, because they were born, you know, like, into the world with the label of being a king or queen or a royalty. Well, that is, for me, is like absurd. And I know, I mean, in the separation of people, and, you know, that they feel, and what a perhaps curse, because to be born into the royal family, and if you know, figure out naturally that you're not separate from anybody else, but you are born, and so you have a reputation to uphold, or you have to keep the charade up. And I like that word charade, because charade is like, you know, like, it's part of this personality that you create, and so you gotta always live under that, and sometimes you're born in it. What a curse, I think. I'm not dissing the family, the royal family. I've met some of them, and what does that mean? Like, it does, because I've met these people doesn't make me any different from anybody. It's interesting, because it's the only way we can recognize ourselves, by recognizing the polar opposites of how we think. You know, we're like almost two brains, right? So we have the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. They're always talking to each other. And that is really easily conditioned under circumstance of societal rules and things we have to follow. And even our parental experiences when we're younger, you know, with or without parents, can create a sense of separation and inferiority and superiority. You know, what is it? You know, like, because your parents are older and they have much more, they've lived here longer, and they give birth to you, and all of these things that happened, you know, and so is there a point where it comes that because they're superior over you, so they tell you what to do, and you feel inferior because you are under their wing, or you can feel that way. And especially when you are going, you know, like, yeah, outside, also too, outside the home environment. When you go to school, there's separation of the rich kids and the poor kids, or, you know, their cliques of, you know, aggressive, and then, you know, the shy, all of these opposites. I'm just saying that we will not ever be able to recognize any of it without each other. So what is better? You know, what is better? Who is better, or who is worse? Or how this judgment comes to be is very interesting here on this human experience. And that we're supposed to follow all these things. Well, it's causing a lot of suffering, like I said before, within myself. And, but of course, I recognize it, and I watch the play. So yesterday, I was just on another note. I don't know, I came home, I felt very good with my day, and I felt really good. You know, I realized that every day is different for me. So it's like my emotions, and what is interesting about me sharing here on this social media for myself is that it's like a diary in a way. And I just talk about just things, you know, like just things and my moods, and I really I'm really expressing myself in my moods. And yesterday I watched a Feeling Low, and I'm okay with that thing, and I looked at him and I watched him in the third person, and I was like, oh, you know, not judgments, but just like you are so brave by allowing all of that. And I learned from watching myself to recognize that, you know, the moods that I have, and then I'm recognizing allowing them. And that, you know, to sometimes to remind myself not to take everything so seriously, and for me to ask for some kind of support on the outside of me. First, fundamentally, I have to support myself. And support myself, I mean, in my mentality and my approach to life, and that's discovering every second and allowing, you know, the conditional self to have its play. And that's an opposite of my energy that's always mostly predominant. And then I have these low sides. What are they? They're polar opposites, but they're the only way I can recognize my higher self is recognized as so-called lower self. But is there such a separation? It's all on the same stick, it seems. So these polarized conditional thoughts that we have are just that, and it seems illusory. So what I started to talk about is like, we do not live in a society of equals, and we feel that, and we can feel that, and we can be around certain people that you think they are projecting a sense of superiority. I think more or less it's more this arrogance that maybe perhaps is a protection and a fear, and you know, especially in positions of power, because that's how they raised. And how I have compassion, and I have more compassion than judging the person. And of course it arises. I mean, it can arise and it will arise, and you can step back and look at it and notice and be conscious, because we're human beings and we can be conscious. So that is a little bit about the human drama, and I wanted to share it this morning because I was just thinking about not living in a society of equals and how we're separated. And there's a possibility to feel that we're not separated. And yeah, this approach to daily life. And I respect myself, I respect all people, and yeah. It is what it is, right? So thank you for watching, and I gotta get to work, and I love you so much, and I will see you when I see you. Thanks for watching my channel, and thank you for subscribing, and if not, click subscribe. My frosty this morning. I love my bags under my eyes. Bye.